Hello, everyone. This is Stacy. Welcome to The Landing. Hello, and welcome to The Landing. I am your host, Stacy Davis Baisden, and I am extremely excited about this initial episode of our podcast. Today's guest is extremely special to me. He is my dad, and I am tickled that he is here with us to get this project off the ground. And we are hoping that the next couple episodes will give you, our listeners, a better understanding of why we chose The Landing to be our banner title for this podcast project. So let's jump right in and let's meet the man, the myth, the legend. Dad, if you will, just introduce yourself and tell the folks who you are and where you're from and just a little bit about yourself before we dive in.
I'm Wayne Davis, Harkers Island. I was born and raised at Red Hill. If you don't know where that is, that's up on the west end of the island. And I was actually raised and born on the landing, or as close as you could get to it. And we lived there we moved from there at about 3 or 4 years old. And then we moved on down, and my grandfather had the house that we lived in there, and we lived in it. My mom and dad lived in it, and my mom and daddy they moved to another place, and that's where I was raised at most of the time. But I have 3 daughters. One of them's aggravating, but
that would be me.
But had 3 daughters and a bunch of grandkids and great grandkids. And I've lived here on Harkers Island all my life. I was born and raised down to the landing. And one time I was in the Coast Guard. And then I worked with the power company on the island for 40 years. And I've also been carving decoys since I was 15 years old. And I can prove it by my hand, bad shape. But other than that, I just, everything is just ready. I'm ready for this thing, man. Let's go.
Let's go, he says. I love it. Daddy, all joking aside, I do appreciate you being here. This is a very special project for the museum. We are going to be covering a lot of topics throughout the course of this project, and picking a name for it was very important to us. And so as we were going back and forth about possibilities, our minds and ideas kept leaning us towards the shore, because that's where it all started for Down East. And so, especially here on the island, the landing is the term that we gave it. And so that's what felt right. And so that's where we landed, if you will. And we want you our listeners to understand why, and why that is so important, and why it felt so right for this project. So, Dad, we're going to jump right in. And if you will, just give us a little bit of background, like why the landing? What does that mean? What was the importance of that name? Where did that phrase come from?
Well, I'm gonna start out with, and then I'll get to a little bit something different. But I'm gonna start out with the whaling at Shackelford Banks. When everybody lived over in Shackelford, the men would go and they would kill whales for the oil. And they had handmade harpoons, and they had to do everything with a rose skiff. So it was kind of hard to get one of those 40-foot whales to the shore. And when they would finally get one in, or heading into the shore, the people that lived on the island, the families, would see them coming in, and they would holler at everybody, because they all worked together to help, and say, "We got to hurry, they're getting ready to land the whale." So I kind of think that might have been part of it. And then later on, that something else about that come up.
Keep on. Tell us a little bit more about like the move and what happened after.
Okay. The families, like I said, they would holler and they would go down and say to get ready, and they would oil meat down and start helping with getting the whale stuff cut up. And then, but after that, get back to where the movement started. The hurricanes in around about 1896 to the 1900s got really bad with the people living over to Shackleton and Cape Lookout. At one time, there was about 500 people lived at Cape Lookout. The hurricanes got worse and worse for that period of time, and they lost their homes and lost a bunch of cattle, got drowned in, and it got so bad that they just decided they had to get somewhere else. So they started moving, and they started moving to places they moved mostly that I know about was Harker's Island, and Soldier Path, and down east. And when they would move, they would go to the shoreline because that was where they was fishing and all that. So it worked out real good. And on the island, it was the south side of the island that they moved to. And they just had to start moving, and they had to move their houses. Some of them took their houses apart and put them on skiffs and moved them. And the local people helped them do that. When they would land the shore with their load of house loaded, on a boat. And then some people built houses, but it just grew from that. And everybody, just worked together and got it to work, so that was the beginning of it.
Now, when you were young, the landing was a huge part of your life. Explain a little bit what the landing entailed, what it included, why it was so important to not just you, but to all of the locals. What did the landing entail?
Well, the landing, when they moved to the landing, it was a lot like being on Shackleton because they had the water surrounded them, and they were mostly fishermen or boat builders or something to do with the water. So it worked out ideal for them, and they were more protected with the ocean being away from them on the Outer Banks. And but they would, I just was raised up down there. My father built his fish house in 1941, and I was born in 42, so I was pretty much raised in the fish house. I was always down there with my father. When I was playing as a kid, or even when I got older enough, I could pick up a shovel. And I just enjoyed doing that kind of work, and worked in the fish house and right on up until I ran the fish house a couple of years after I graduated. And the fishing around the island got so bad that I eventually went in the Coast Guard and done something different. But the landing was what I really enjoyed, was more than anything else. I've always said if I could have done something and made a living out of it, it would be in the water or something to land it.
Now, when you say the landing, what does that mean? I mean, is it one particular spot, or like what does the landing mean?
The landing is from the water's edge on up to where the tree line pretty much is what's called the landing. That's what we consider the landing. Anything if somebody said we're going to go down to the seaside or we're going down to the shore, they actually go into the landing to go to the shore. Because the landing is really what the whole thing is, and the other things are just part of that. And everybody called it we were going to the landing, and no matter where they were, if it was on the island somewhere, if they were going to the landing, they were going to the shore.
Mm-hmm. And what was there? Like if you went, was it just the shore, what was on the shore? What was around it?
Well, after they all got settled in and got moved to the landing, they built. I don't remember, but I know of 3 different stores was there when I was young. I don't remember them. My grandfather had one, and his half brother had one, and there was another one down up to the east end of the island. So, and there were stores, and then the post office was on to the landing, and they had different things. Boat builders. They was to the landing, and it made it great for them because they built their boats, and then they could float them without, because nobody, I don't think over here had a trailer at that time. So everything had to be done closer to the water. And it was just different things. They kept growing. And the people actually, when the way they got around was they had to walk down the shore. The only way they could get from one place to the other, they had to go on the shore because behind them was everything but wood. Nothing had never been developed in the back of them. So everybody got to know each other when they would go down by their house and they would talk and things. So everybody knew everybody on the island. So there were the different things like the fish houses was built at one time. There were like 7 fish houses down there, and now we don't have any.
Wow.
So it's just changed a lot down there from the landing, but it's still our landing.
Right. So the landing was a term of endearment for a place where everything happened. It was like the hub of the island. It was a communication. It was entertainment. It was reuniting. It was everything. Business. You mentioned the post office, the fish houses.
Right. Yeah, actually, my grandfather run the mailboat for 20 years. And then there's another fellow, Mr. Kelly Village. He ran the mailboat for around 20 years also. And they had to run every day or 5 days a week from Harkers Island to Beaufort and then to Cape Lookout and back to the island. And they would pick the mail up or take the mail each time. And that was one of the things that they did. And what I enjoy most about the landing was growing up down there was playing. I mean, we played a lot.
Now, when you say playing, what do you mean? Like what kind of play did you? I know, but I want you to share some of the things.
Well, I mean, we would swim a lot. We take little pieces of wood and tie a string on them, play like little boats and stuff, you know. And as we got a little bit older, a little bit stronger, I remember one time there was an old skiff a man had down there tied to a pilot. And we would take that skiff and turn it upside down and get up under it. And we would say if it was under there, so if it rained, we wouldn't get wet. But anything we could find was like the net spreads. We played with the net spreads where the fishermen would put their nets to dry them out. And they wasn't using them. We always played with them. It was always cooler under the net spreads where the sun wasn't shining so much. And anything we could find to play with, we did it, you know, from, I don't know, anything we could do. We figured out, we could figure out something.
So you used your imagination and went with it.
Yeah.
Is it true that you would go to the landing basically sun up to sundown? I mean, you'd be there.
We did. We went there, and the best I can remember, we only had one pair of shoes, and we used them Sunday school. The rest of the time we were barefooted. But, yeah, I remember, one of the things I remember when I was growing up, going to the fish house before I got too old, there was a cemetery about way down there. It was only about 500 feet from our house to the fish house. And there was no lights or nothing else down there. A couple of people lived down there, but there's no lights. And I remember going to the fish house, and I would run down there until I get to the cemetery, and then I'd run twice as fast until I get around that, and then I would see a little light, and then I was all right, and then I'd ready going back. But I remember that. I was pretty quick. But I just enjoyed going down there, playing with the carts and doing, you know. And one of the things I remember when I was growing up down there, it was a couple of people working with my father, a couple of men. And they said at times they would wait for the boats. They would like roast some clams or do something like that. And we would just sit down and watch them. And once in a while, one of the guys, Warren or Ben Watson or some of the tribe would come around selling watermelons. And one of them older men would buy one and would call all us up there. And we had big watermelons. And it was times the family would go down to the landing and with a couple of families, our family and another couple would go down there and they make homemade ice cream. It was always something going on around there, you know, that you don't see much of anymore.
Right. I love it. And I'm sorry to say that when I was coming up, a lot of that had already changed. You know, the landing wasn't the same as what you experienced. And it certainly isn't the same now for my kids. I remember, for example, you and Mom constantly reminding us of how, you know, how good y'all had it. And now I find myself, you know, feeling that same way because change is inevitable and it's happening all around us so quickly. Is there anything before we close out? Is there anything that you would like to add? Anything that you feel like we need to touch on and that folks need to understand about the landing?
Well, the landing has changed a lot in my lifetime, but it's still the landing. Um, the older people out on the island started moving, dying, and some of the families and stuff that owned the property and stuff, they never did have much. I mean, never growing up. And they would sell some of their property, and then people would come in that was going to retire and move over here. And nothing wrong with that, because some of my best friends is that, and I don't blame them. If I was in their position, I've done it too. But it's changed a lot as far as playing along the shore or having a store or nothing like that is down there anymore. But we still got the shore line down there, and you can still come shore in your boat. Anybody that's got a house down there, I don't know if they know it or not, but anybody that owns a house to the landing or in the shore anywhere in this area, they can go to your beach and play all day, and you can't do anything about it because they can't do anything beyond the high water mark. And
That's right.
So really, people could really enjoy it if they didn't get shot, I reckon. But anyway,
Hey.
the landing has changed a lot before. It doesn't have the businesses. When they lived over there in the beginning, like I say, I told you one time, they used to travel down the shore by walking down the shore to visit. And then later on, they got together, some of them, and made a path on the north side of all their houses, so they could walk down behind their house like a path or a little trail, like.
So the beach would be on the south side,
Yeah.
and then the path would be on the north
On the
side.
north side, and they would make it big enough. I guess I think they had maybe some horse and carts and that type of thing, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And then later on, they built the first shell road in the same area, in the Shell Road. And a lot of people don't know about Shell Point. There was a lot of shells in Shell Point. And they always said the Indians, when they put them there, they really must have had a lot of oysters. Because I always understood that they were going to build a road from there to Shackelford. And I do know that Shackelford and the island was a lot closer at that time before he washed away. And I remember Joe's daddy told me one time we had a water leak. I was out working, and we was digging down and we hit some shells when I was working with the water company. And he said, "You don't remember, you don't know it." He said, "But your daddy done the first load of shells on this road," and said, "I done the second load."
Wow.
So it goes way back, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And for those listening and don't know, Shell Point is the east end of the island, right near the museum. It's right here at the
All the way
end.
to the end of the
Mhm.
island is what they call Shell Point. And there were so many shells, and I know this for a fact because I saw it in the newspaper, where it was so many shells down there. A tugboat and a barge had a load of shells and took them to Portsmouth, Virginia. And how come it was in the newspaper? They got aground, and the Coast Guard had to go and get them off. And there was an article about it in the newspaper.
Mhm.
So they had to build a lot of shells that they hold loads all the way to Portsmouth, Virginia.
Wow. Wow. That is amazing. Well, Dad, you did it. I appreciate you coming so much. And I am so grateful for the childhood that I had and for the parents that I had that were born and raised here on the island and understand what it means to go to the landing and to have that. And I'm hoping that this podcast will do the landing justice and be the hub for information and for reuniting and for growing and learning together as we go through this journey.
Yeah, I just got to say that my favorite place to play was the landing. I got a lot of memories about it, and I know it's changed, but it's still the landing to all the locals. And I hope that other people start calling it the landing too.
I
So
would
thank
love
you.
that. I would love that. And you are welcome. And I love you. Thank you, Daddy.
I love you better.
Nah. I hope you enjoyed my interview with Mr. Wayne Davis as much as I surely did. I would like to invite you to visit Wayne's current exhibit at the Core Sound Waterfowl Museum and Heritage Center. It is fittingly titled The Landing and includes handcrafted dioramas built by the late Stevie Lewis of a fish house, scallop house, and boat house that would have been located to the landing that Daddy spoke about. Please join me next week to hear from our guest, Miss Suzanne Guthrie. She will continue to help us connect our past with our future by sharing her experiences and understanding of the landing. Until then, stay safe and be kind.